If someone had to ask me, where does digital discussions play a role within the information management process on a project? I would personally say from my experience that every project starts with a discussion and it should be recorded from the very start, regardless of what your role in that project is going to be. And that would be seen as the formal start of collaboration. The interesting thing about today's way of working is that we live in a world where everything is connected, where everything is becoming equally excellent. So what's your excuse then for not starting the discussions digitally? We've all been in meetings. Square tables, round tables, dirty site tables, and the latest type of digital table is a Zoom meeting or a Teams meeting. And these meetings tend to drag on, and members ramble on, they have other agendas, and often they're written on the back of cigarette boxes or even on the corner of a superseded site drawing. Information in that capacity, unfortunately, will never get to be shared or archived correctly. Now, for most managers who are required to hold meetings or create a meeting agenda, you need to make sure it's meaningful as well as concise and organized. Now, with the new digital way of discussions online, this becomes more challenging because it has to be set and scheduled to the minute. And if you miss out, you will miss the start of the meeting. And if this is the first time you're hearing about terms such as a common data environment or an employer's information requirement, now known as an exchange information requirement, then you can consider yourself as an industry laggard. Even though most countries right now across the globe say that they have adopted BIM practices, you would think that they would have at least some sort of information management protocol set up on their projects. But what surprises me from my research and my experience are that there are still many early adopters within our industry who are using platforms such as Google Drive and Dropbox, even worse, FTP sites and VPNs to access project information. Seriously? You moved from a BlackBerry to a smartphone, but you can't see the value in moving to industry-based platforms that offer not only a massive benefit to you, the client, and the project team, but also a return on your investment. Remember, inevitably, project meetings will always have to take place around a table. But remember, almost everyone attending that meeting will receive an agenda or even meeting minutes. And if your objective is to impart with information using a platform, try to do it online digitally. Let's say using a common data environment platform such as Asite, where the dashboard can track the audit trail of those who have been tasked with responsibilities, and then can notify the team members, regardless if they're at the meeting or not, of the outcomes as well as the progress of all of the tasks and responsibilities set out within the meeting agenda. There are various CDE features that are available for team members that help them comment or make discussions on information that can now be shared with the team formally as well as informally. We're so quick to use applications such as WhatsApp to manage our personal communications. Using free platforms at a project level, such as Dropbox or Google Drive, will only have disastrous consequences later on or even well after the project. COVID-19 pandemic has given us an opportunity, each and every single one of us, to allow us to restart ourselves, reset, and reinvent ourselves. And as a project team, you need to decide in advance what the objective is of that meeting. And within that digital discussion or that virtual meeting, these digital discussions or virtual meetings, there needs to be four purposes. You need to create and fuse a team. You need to also impart and share project information. You need to brainstorm ideas and make decisions for the team, as well as the client. And finally, you need to collect information digitally and make decisions based on the information that's available. Now, capturing and sharing all correspondence and discussions is absolutely essential for yourself as well as your team. Remember, it works both ways. When things go wrong, it can and will be held against you as well as your team. And as a BIM rule of engagement, it's time for you to step up as a team leader and educate your team as well as your boss. And if you get your marching orders because of that, he's done you a favor, because when you're up creek without a paddle, you don't want to be around and answer to the other people's because of their poor decisions. Paul Wilkinson is our mentor for this week, and he's a technology consultant, writer, freelance journalist, as well as a public speaker, and actually holds a PhD in criminology. Now, Paul has also been a successful author for many industry guidance textbooks. He was, in fact, the first person to write a comprehensive guide to construction collaboration technologies. Let's see what Paul's got to say.
And I'm going to be talking from 4 perspectives reflecting different stages and different elements of my career. First and foremost, I'm a communicator. I am a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Public Relations. I've been working in the field of corporate communications for 30 years, helping organisations, helping clients evolve their approach to how they deliver key messages to key stakeholders and how they engage people in their projects. Secondly, I'm a collaborator. Ever since the mid-90s, I've been involved in developing collaborative working initiatives, and when Constructing Excellence was established to further the objectives of Sir Michael Latham and John Egan when they were talking about better team working and partnering in the industry, I got involved as a collaborative working champion with Constructing Excellence, evolving ideas about what are the ingredients of successful collaboration on construction projects. Thirdly, I'm a collaboration technologist. Building on the work that I was doing at Constructing Excellence, I got involved with writing case studies about how technology could be deployed to help support collaborative team working. And as a consequence of that, I wrote a book about collaboration technologies and have evolved that then into writing a blog and continuing to work in the field. And one area of collaboration is building information modelling, or better information management, depending on your definition of it. I've been involved in the BIM movement in the UK since it started back at the turn of the last decade, around about 2010, 2011. And more recently, I took on a new role as chair of the technology group of the UK BIM Alliance, and that has helped me get a new view of how technology supports the people and processes involved in delivering a successful project using BIM. So let's start with my sort of communicator perspective to begin with. When I was setting out as a communicator, I did my qualifications, and it was very clear that, working with a client, working in-house with your employer, that you needed as a communicator to think first and foremost about what the organisational objectives were, what were its goals, what was the vision that it had. From that, you could then distill down perhaps a definition of what the organisation's mission might be. Then you could launch straight into developing a strategy on the back of that, but also there was a key stage that should be undertaken, and that was to research. That was to understand the stakeholders that were out there, the resources that you had available, what other organisations perhaps had done to meet similar goals or achieve similar objectives. And then you could then develop a strategy, a set of guiding principles that were going to direct the effort. And that would then lead into a more detailed action plan, the tactics that you would be using to drive that forward. And then it's simply, after that, it's a question of execution, putting those tactics into play, taking the actions that you've identified and following them through to completion. But that's not the end of the process. It's also important that you measure the outcomes. This is not just about outputs, the communication effort, writing content or producing videos or so on, but you do need to measure the outcomes. How you've influenced people, how your communications perhaps have changed people's perspectives. And that same kind of approach in terms of measuring outcomes, I think, is important when we're also talking about delivering construction projects too. My second perspective is one as somebody who's been interested in collaboration, the collaborator perspective. Back in the early days of Constructing Excellence, I got involved in the development of what became a toolkit for collaborative working. That was revamped more recently and reimagined for 21st century project delivery. And at the core of this was the idea of an integrated project team. That's the kind of thing we're talking about in a BIM project here. But it was interesting that there were a number of stages before we got to the integrated project team. Firstly, we had to establish the need for the project. Sometimes it wasn't always strictly necessary to deliver a complete new project. You might be able to re-engineer existing resources to deliver the same outcome, for example. So then it was about developing a strategic brief and creating and defining the value criteria that you needed to deliver the objective of the project. You then needed to create and screen different solutions, different ways in which that objective might be achieved, and then develop the agreed solution to a point where you can then start to implement an agreed team, implement an agreed solution, and ensure that all of the strategic brief and criteria are capable of being met. So this is driving through a structured process that helps bring about an integrated project team. Second perspective has really come from an evolution of how we think about collaboration, and it's been instilled in me that successful collaboration is a combination of people, processes and technologies. And importantly, I should stress that they are in that order: people at the top, then process, and then technologies. And the order of magnitude of balance in this equation is that it's 90% people and process and only perhaps 10% technologies. And you can see that perhaps from the graphic on the right-hand side. This comes from a consultancy organisation called Constructive Collaboration. And they've defined sort of 5 main areas of successful collaborative environments. Ones which cover how we behave, how we work, how teams are organised, the commercial structures around that team, and also how that team learns and improves itself. And on the how we work, again, it states that we do need some clear project objectives. And then when it comes to organising ourselves, we need some effective collaborative leadership in that endeavour. I was struck by the similarity of that kind of model, that kind of approach, that kind of hierarchy of needs from goals and objectives, setting up structures, creating process and appointing the right team, and then giving the people technology. When I saw an article recently published by McKinsey, they were looking at the common characteristics that resilient organisations demonstrate during the COVID-19 crisis. Establishing a common purpose and clear communications was the first. Setting up structures to allow rapid decision making was the second key aspect. Creating networks of local teams with clear accountable roles, important there too. And developing a culture that empowers people, absolutely important if you're going to encourage a collaborative work and have constructive conversations, constructive digital discussions on your project. And that digital discussions element also needs technology. So you do need to provide people with the technologies that they need to support their ways to support the ways of working, to support the achievement of the project goals. My fourth aspect, which I won't dwell on for too much, is really my perspective on things as a collaboration technologist. I wrote a book about construction collaboration technologies subtitled The Extranet Evolution, which was published in 2005. And as part of my work following publication of the book, I decided to start writing a blog. And this has become a news blog that I've kept going since 2005, now more than 15 years old. And I'm continuing to write about the technologies and the industry changes that are helping develop collaborative forms of working, helping teams communicate, coordinate, cooperate, as well as collaborate. And it was interesting recently to hear Paul Morell, one of the architects of the UK BIM revolution, stressing the need for integration in project teams and underlining that the key leader in a lot of these digital discussions has to be the client. So that is the graphic that's on my on the slide here from a recent post on Extranet Evolution. My fourth perspective comes from that of being involved with the UK BIM Alliance. The UK BIM Alliance is one of 3 organisations involved in creating and maintaining the UK BIM framework. That is the overarching approach to the implementation of BIM in the UK. And it takes a very holistic view, a whole life view of the need to manage information. It's not just focused on the design and the build phases, which many construction teams are. It looks at the opportunities, particularly from the client perspective, that they've got a need to operate their facilities. And in many cases, then there is a need to integrate their back office and their capital and operational expenditure projects. And the UK BIM framework is delivered through a website at ukbimframework.org, and you can access standards and guidance through this. And I would stress that all of the guidance is free to download and free to use, and includes a lot of very detailed guidance. One of the principles in all of this is to start those discussions about a project with the end in mind. This is where the client's objectives are vitally important, because they start to drive what they want out at the end of the project. You know, it can be tempting to be to talk purely about what the asset's going to be and how it's going to be constructed and what success will look like in terms of a construction project. But from a client's perspective, their objectives are often much wider. They often have organisational requirements that they're aiming to achieve, and you know their success won't be defined just by what's achieved at handover, but by how well that asset can be operated and used throughout its operational life, and how end users and other stakeholders view its success. So, you know, it's important here from the point of view of the client here to define what information requirements they've got, how they want information that's to be delivered to them, and how they're going to approve it. So there's a lot of feedback loops here. So these diagrams come from the some of the guidance that's been produced as part of the UK BIM framework. There's some of the Part 2 guidance, and you can sort of see the starting point is the organisation, the client, the employer, the owner, depending on your terminology here, setting out what it is that they want in terms of their organisational needs. That can contribute to project information requirements, but also encapsulates what their asset needs are going to be, and that again contributes to exchange information requirements. You know, how they're going to need information to be exchanged between parties involved in delivering the assets, and it takes us then, and that contributes ultimately to the project information model, the technology that's often used for collaboration by the project team to deliver the asset, which later might form part of the asset information model, into specific requirements in terms of an asset information model. That's a very quick gallop through my perspective on digital discussions. I will share some of the links with Vaughan so that he can make these available to you. I hope you've enjoyed it. Please have a look at Extranet Evolution and other places that I've talked about, like the UK BIM framework, and good luck in your BIM and digital discussions in the future.